So now, Will, we can go on and maybe talk about the Great Wide Open
Yeah.
and just supply a little more. It was such a great conversation. So many new ideas or new ways of approaching things that people already think they know about. Such as Sufi or such as putting Buddhism into one category and Sufism into another and yoga into another.
Yeah.
But now I feel that we've really opened things up for people to acknowledge some of what they're experiencing or be motivated to do some more emotional work processing so that they can now take that and soften and move into the rewards, the ecstatic piece, and not just be stuck in the static piece. Okay, so I think you.
Yeah, where should we start? Because I mean, there's so much we can do here.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean,
I'll take your lead, Amy.
okay, sure. I made a few notes of things that we. Oh, okay. Let's see. Some of the things that you touched on were hollow bamboo breathing, and I think you spoke of melting the primal contraction. And we talked a little bit about our birthright state, the great wide open, shimmering. There's something that we have here. Where you talk about what Rumi referred to as union consciousness and the Advaita Vedantas call the non-dual state, you think of as the Mahamudrik ground, or more accurately, the river state. And I find that a very beautiful image, the river state. I thought you could speak with us more about that. And maybe you might tell us about miniature golf courses as well.
Miniature golf courses. I remember that now. I'm going to have to think of that one. That was an email newsletter I sent out.
I'll give you a little reminder, and if you feel like you can get into it.
Yeah.
You talked about how the windmill was generally the largest of obstacle structures on the entire course. Right? When you time it right, the ball can go through the small opening into the windmill, but if you don't time it right, it gets blocked by one of the rotating blades. And then you spoke about how one of the easiest ways we can dissolve the egoic perspective and enter into the non-dual state is merging other back into a coterminous whole.
Coterminous, yeah.
Thank you. Coterminous whole. And you talk about located at the back of the eyes.
Right. Well, that would be the place from which we look. We don't look from our physical eyes. We look from a place, way back behind here. And if we're looking from our physical eyes, we're more tied up in egoic mask persona consciousness. When we move, backwards, that's where things, start opening for us. Now, let me start maybe what you're talking about with, we often hear of statements, the ground of being. I often talk about it as the Mahamudrik ground state. But I often realized I didn't really like the terminology of ground, because ground seems sort of hard and solid. And it's very, very much more the experiential dimension of that is very, very flowing and very, very motile and very, very, very much, moving, so that when we start softening, dissolving, relaxing the tensions throughout the body and the mind, that keep us locked away from this most natural of conditions. When we start dissolving those, that's what actually has to happen to start entering into those natural states. It's not as though we have to work to strive to attain something. We just have to let go of what's keeping us from, just falling back down into that natural dimension, from occurring. So that's the one. And when we do this, yeah, things get very fluid. They get very open, and that's, we were talking earlier in the first part of our conversation. We come from a place that's very claustrophobic to all of a sudden, ooh, you get fuller and you get larger, and woo, the feeling state keeps getting larger and larger, and that's when we go into what I prefer this notion. I like to call it the Great Wide Open. Is our natural state. There was a Buddhist scholar from Canada. He's passed away. His name was Herbert Gunther, many years ago. He translated sunyata states, which mostly in the West has been translated as emptiness or void. He translated it as open dimension of being. And I very, very much liked that, because that made a lot more sense to me. And it brought it down into more of an experiential feeling state rather than a concept or a word. But I really like this notion of the Great Wide Open that permeates this world of the billions and billions of appearances of very, very discrete objects, and as though we have these two dimensions that are here all the time. We're born into the world of form, and most of us live within that world and never twig to the fact that there is this other dimension that is underlying this, is constantly permeating this. So in the Heart Sutra, you hear that there's form and there's emptiness, and they're both reflections of each other. Now, one of the places that my spiritual inquiry begins, Amy, early on in my early 20s, when I started realizing, it just started striking me as really peculiar that we look at one another and we recognize each other by your very solid looking face and body. But when we experience ourselves, we don't experience ourselves as solid at all. There's this strange kind of openness that pervades and hovers around and through this physical object of the body. So, there are these two dimensions that are constantly occurring. I'm very drawn to the notions of the quantum physicist David Bohm, who said, yes, we have the explicate world of form, but underlying it is almost like a single source, like a light from which holographic images are projected. And we're moving back and forth between these. And that to me is a lot of what the practices are all about, is living in these two worlds. It seems like they can't possibly exist simultaneously, but they do. So we have the apparently physical world, the ground, and then we have this wide open river dimension. And it's opening into an awareness of this great wide open river dimension. That's where a lot of the suffering just starts getting the plug pulled on it. And it just feels so vitally essential, central, and important to this path that that people who are watching this, we're all on. For whatever reason, we've been drawn to this, right?
Yes, and it's beautiful the way you describe it, and for me, thrilling, continually, quietly thrilling in a confirming way. I think the word that I use is intuition a lot. Intuition is my bridge between human and being, between what appears so solid when I look at you, but feels so fluid when it's me.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then what gets even more interesting for me, this gets into the eyes wide open, is that if this is true of me, that I am both solid form and wide open space, it's true not only for every other human, but for every other physical object as well. So that there can be times when, we're accustomed to looking out at the visual field in front of us and seeing solid objects. Now, what gets very interesting is when you're able to sensationalize the body, when you're able to undergo that transformational shift and actually experience that what's sitting here is this wild field of shimmering feeling presence. Once you're able to do that, you start looking out at the visual field, and solid objects don't look that solid anymore. You start seeing them as having this kind of, glow and shimmer. And then it becomes very easy. You also mentioned, Rumi talks about union consciousness as opposed to the conventional consciousness of separation. And here we're swimming in A Course in Miracles, right? Because Miracles says, what we need to do is heal the separation.
Yes.
That who I am is this entity, in my case named Will, who is kind of like poured into this body like milk into a carton or something, and who I am is separate from everything and everybody that I can perceive to exist outside of this physical container or carton. A Course in Miracles tells us that's where the suffering comes from.
Yes.
So that when we can start opening that and realizing that there actually isn't a separation between the experiential me and the objects that I view in the physical world. It's tricky to talk about this, but what I'm wanting to stress is not just platitude or concept. We want to relax so deeply that visual field just starts streaming right into and through us. And there can be no rigid me at that point. It has to be just wide open, and in that conjoined embrace, that's where I'm happy. That's where I enjoy being here.
And I'd like to jump in and say that for me, the visual field that you're describing is also a kinesthetic field. So few thoughts.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So you said absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very kinesthetic. It's very feelingful. But I'm wanting to hear what you're wanting to say about it.
Thank you. So two thoughts came up, and one was for people with vision issues or who were born blind, you're not exempt from this experience. Then it becomes a kinesthetic felt experience.
Right.
You don't need images or the visual field to have this knowing re-enter you. And the other thing is you're playing with the word pour and porous, that from a Course in Miracles standpoint, you could say that we're sort of poured into the body, and then we're kind of imprisoned in the false identity of thinking that this is it.
False identity, right.
And what I've realized through doing your work and body-oriented work is that something that appears hard, like a rock, or like my bones or my spine, is actually quite porous and fluid. And it is also, would you say, soft tissue? There's softer tissue and harder soft tissue, but help me explain what I'm grokking.
Yeah. One of the things just to recognize is that bodies are something like 70% water. That we are water, so much in fact that I remember when I was first studying human anatomy, I came across this one writer who kind of joked that human beings were perhaps a strategy on the part of water to move itself from place to place. We're literally fluid, and it feels very solid and impenetrable and impermeable that way. But when you give yourself permission to actually feel, to change, the focus from being lost in thought to just putting your awareness anywhere in your body, and ultimately it's the whole of the body, it's just fluid, it's shimmery, it's so motile. That seems to be what allows the rigid separation between me and the world to start breaking down. And so this crack between the two world opens, and we start swimming in what Rumi would call union consciousness, or Advaita Vedanta calls the non-dual state. For me, what I like to stress about those states, they're very feelingful.
Mm-hmm.
Space and its shimmer. It's not some kind of abstract, arid, dry brittle, transcendent kind of, kind of understanding. One more thing that I was thinking about, something that you said. I'm wondering if you were in that meeting many years ago in New York, and I know that's where I first met you, and I was out there, doing a lot of the gazing.
Yes.
Teaching. I was wondering if you were in the gathering once where there was a woman who was blind. Were you in that one? And I'm wondering, how is this going to work? How's she going to gaze with a partner? Well, she got it at a huge, deep level. I don't know. Maybe.
I think I was there.
You remember her? She was something.
Yes.
It was really just remarkable. And hearing her, talk about her experiences that were very, very deep. I mean, she got it. She got what this practice was all about.
Yes. I've always had a story or a poem inside of me called The Blind Man's Dream.
Okay.
So I have some kind of pull towards the blind because they see with their other senses. And speaking of senses, my intuition has told me that we don't want to just look with the eyes. We want the eyes to be used so that the seeing goes through them, something like that.
Yeah. Well, the eyes are just simply the pathway that vision enters us. Look, ultimately, especially you feel this when you do the gazing practice that Rumi and Shams were doing. It's as though the whole awakened body becomes the organ of vision. It's not just the eyes. And you see that if you had to pinpoint a place, it's back, behind, and down.
Mm-hmm.
More empty, part of bodily experience that you.
Is it more the pineal gland?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, pineal gland is mostly probably more towards towards the front and above.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's the whole body, but maybe it's this awareness of the whole body that stimulates the pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that kind of thing. And I'm just thinking too, I don't know where I saw this just the other day. A woman who suddenly lost her vision, and she said she started hearing in colors.
Oh.
Yeah, that somehow. And look, those of us that get very, very sensitive. When sounds come in, we feel them as strong sensation in the body, right? So, I mean, you get this kinesthesia, all the, or synesthesia, all the, the senses start, intermingling. But, ultimately there does seem to be an entry back into a place where vision, sound, and sensation just start kind of coming together. And that, to me, when they come together, that's like turning the lock in the door, and the crack between the two worlds opens, and we just swim. That's a water image again, back into this more natural condition.
Yeah.
Is where we want to live from. And here's the other thing to say about that more natural condition. Again, as I was saying, because sometimes I think some of these notions of enlightenment or something, they're so austere and barren and kind of arid and dry. It ain't dry. It's very rich. It's feelingful. And for lack of a better word, the emotional tone of the Great Wide Open is love. And it does seem to be this feeling dimension that it's like the glue or something that binds it. I cannot merge vision, sound, and body and stay kind of remote and held back and arid and dry. You have to feel that, that joyous kind of surrender that ultimately dissolves conventional mind, and then we just float on down the river.
Yes.
And you go in and out of that thousands of times a day. Let's be honest. In my experience anyway, it's not that you have an enlightenment experience and that's it. It's constantly about this moment. It's constantly choosing what we want for this very moment. So it's so easy. The mind comes in, I often say, like a thief in the night. It steals away your awareness. And then, you remember, thank you, mind, for reminding me that I've lost touch with my body. I'm holding back on my breath. Visual field has receded away from me. Sounds, I wasn't even hearing them. And, we kind of resurrect the, that joined, connected experience. And there it is again. There it is again, for as long as it lasts, until the mind comes in again like a thief in the night and steals it away. But that's practice. To me, it's ongoing, constant. That's, to me, the mindfulness practice.
Yes.
Being aware, not just being mindful. Yes, that's the foundation, being aware, but then letting go. Then absolutely letting go. Mindfulness allows us to let go. It's kind of like mindfulness is like learning the scales. And then, a really great musician can just let go.
Yes, I love it. And I love what you said about love, because love is juicy. Love is not dry.
It ain't dry. It ain't dry at all. And it's part of the natural, the natural condition. And, we all say we're looking for it, but then when we meet it, it scares us, or we don't know what to do about it. And then, what does it mean? Most people go, oh my God, there's love. And then, okay, this has to follow. For me, Coco and I are very, very bonded. And I've often said, we've been fortunate. We met through the gazing practice and bonded very, very quickly. That, I want to, because we're both, Amy, we're both this physical incarnated body that's born, is going to die. And we're also, this great wide open. I've often said, I want to make physical love with, one person, but I want to share love with everything and everyone.
Yes.
That's what works for me.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. I feel like there's no more to say. At least for now. I'm sure we could talk much more, and I have plenty more questions for you, but
let's just see what happens. See what kind of, response you get. Yeah, you and I could talk for a long, long time. But I've enjoyed doing this with you. I knew I was going to enjoy doing this with you.
I'm very happy to hear that you did enjoy doing it.
Yeah. It's funny, Amy. This is where I'm comfortable socializing. I'm less comfortable with a drink in my hand at a party or something. Everybody is, doing their thing. It's, I like sitting and teaching and interacting with people. And I get folks like you. This is where it's fun for me.
I'm exactly the same way. And when I was training to be a psychotherapist, my supervisor, who I loved so much, told us that doing deep Gestalt work ruined her for cocktail parties. She just couldn't tolerate chit chat anymore.
I can do it. I'll play there.
Yeah.
I don't force anything on anybody, right? But
of course,
I'm always curious to see who's going to ante up with what. With whatever. I was on a plane the other day, and I sat down. All of a sudden, there's this person coming down the aisle, and she sits down next to me, and I was, just kind of in my space, and she just turns to me and said, "I just have to talk to someone. I think you're someone I can talk to. I just finished doing a 10-day Goenka Vipassana retreat, and this is on the airplane, and we just talked for the whole flight, and now she's going to come down to Costa Rica and cook for a retreat that we're going to hold." So,
how perfect! Perfect.
These kinds of things seem to happen the more we align ourselves with feeling presence.
Yeah, I do have one last question for you. I don't think you taught me this. I think it was Puran Bear,
okay,
Sufi teacher of mine. In a gazing practice, he had us look into one eye of the person we were facing, not both eyes, where he said it can kind of, you go cross-eyed or something. And then in going into the one eye, I was very surprised to find that it could almost be like a psychedelic experience, like the face just started to morph and change.
Right. That's how it works. Generally, people find that they're probably drawn more to the left eye of the partner. I don't know why that is. It just seems to happen that way. And, the extraordinary thing about the gazing practice, and, I talk about this in Rumi's Four Essential Practices, and in the other book, The Spiritual Practices of Rumi, is all about the gazing practice, right? The thing about that, you hold, you just look and you hold each other's gaze. Well, that's taboo within conventional social interaction, partly because when you do that, boundaries start melting and so you move into this physical opening where actually the energetic fields of the two partners can just start merging and bonding, and then the visual field can get very, very unusual. Hard edges dissolve. There can be light or color. It's quite magical. But then what you're referring to, it can start happening. All of a sudden, the face can morph and change, and all of a sudden, the person that you're looking at is not the person that you sat down with, but they might look like a person from history or someone that you've never seen, or different, all sorts of different kinds of images can come up. I know I've shared this with people that are involved with past life regressions, and they're very interested in this. Could they be, seeing, is this a tool that they can use? I don't know. I don't really have any understanding. I'm not that interested in pinpointing what's happening. I just want to keep moving with the experience. Although oftentimes when I've done gazing with people, there is a certain image that that has been common that they see in me. So who knows what's going on?
What's going on between you and me in this conversation is that I often have a question for you and you answer it without me asking it. So I was moving into a question about reincarnation, and this happens several times. It's the attunement.
Yeah. I don't probably have any kind of good answer about that. I have difficulty, Coco, one of the things that she does in the retreat, she works with people and their dreams, because in intensive meditation retreat, your dream life goes technicolor. I have more trouble remembering my dreams, and sometimes I think, gee, I have trouble remembering my dreams. How can I remember past lives? Sure, I've had inklings. Most of us have. I sometimes think that what may happen at the moment of death to so many of us, that we've been holding back on our energetic natural condition, that I think at the moment of death, that just goes pop. And if we've been holding back on it and we're unfamiliar with it, it may be too overwhelming and we just go unconscious and probably miss the experience. So that sometimes I think, I hope I'm right about this, obviously I'm going to find out, and we're all going to find out, that to the degree that we work on ourselves in this way, and who knows what our deaths are going to be like. Some are very gentle, some are very, very tragic and rough and sudden. But if there can be a gradual opening into that state, my sense is those of us who've been doing this kind of work on ourselves may be able to, to melt into those dimensions more gracefully, and then I'd like to remember what goes on. I always like Carlos Castaneda. He said his favorite graffiti was, "Death is the greatest trip. That's why God saves it for last."
That's great. I'm glad you shared that. I've spoken with Rupert Spira about something he said, that was that the dream state, the dream state is closer to our natural state, right? Because in the dream state, we can fly, we're not bound by gravity. Right. We have a much more great wide open available to us than in just the plain waking state. So what you're saying about sort of preparing for death in doing a practice like this, it makes perfect sense to me. And I'm very interested in death. I feel that my whole life has been an interest in death, that it scared me previously, probably coming from a past life, and we've probably all died many, many times. And now I want to approach death with interest, just like opening French doors or something.
Yeah. Hopefully it can, it can work that way. And look, the Sufis say you have to die before you die. And they could have used probably a better PR person, because it sounds kind of weird. Who's going to be attracted to that? But what they're getting at is that you want to dissolve and soften the holding that keeps you thinking that you're this separate entity, so that you can really come alive while you are alive. And we talk so much about this. It's dissolving and it's expanding and it's opening. And if anything happens at death, that must happen. We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah,
if you go first, please contact me.
I'll do my best. I'm making deals with people, and sometimes, I don't know, you get inklings.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Amy.